pleasure to be here today with my distinguished colleagues, and of course to be with Herbert Bloch, my fellow member on the Commission. I'm going to go in a slightly different direction, but hopefully it will be as relevant. In September, I stood in a field in Poland at a ceremony to dedicate a memorial to the murdered Jews of the village of Kalužin in Poland. This is a piece of land, unremarkable to the naked eye, but it tells the story of an entire community. For the Jews of Kalužin, none of whom are left to speak for themselves, we have only the remains of their Jewish cemetery, in which the Nazis committed mass murder, to remind us that they ever lived at all. On behalf of the U.S. government, I, the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, along with representatives of the Polish government, community members, and the Israeli ambassador to Poland, stood there not to merely acknowledge the fate of the Kalužin Jews, but to honor their lives and to remember that theirs are stories that unite all Jews around the world. The U.S. Commission for the Preservation of America's Heritage Abroad, the government body that facilitated the installation of this memorial, together with the local group, the Foundation for the Preservation of Jewish Heritage in Poland, was created for places like Kalužin. Congress established the Commission in response to concerns from members of the American Jewish community that in the decades following the Holocaust, Jewish cemeteries in countries that fell behind the Iron Curtain were being destroyed, desecrated, or lost due to neglect. In my time at the Commission, where I served a 5-year term as chair and now serve as a member, I've worked with my fellow members and other governments to preserve and protect these sites that are intrinsic to the American heritage, both Jewish and not Jewish. The Commission's mandate includes the preservation and protection of memorials, historic buildings, and other endangered properties associated with our heritage, not just Jewish Americans. These include Muslim and Protestant sites in Bulgaria, Old Believer Christian sites in Lithuania, and Roma sites in Poland. The Commission also negotiates bilateral cultural agreements with the foreign governments, of which there are 25 agreements. I had the honor to sign the last such agreement a year ago with the Foreign Minister of Belarus. With the approval of the Belarusian government, the Commission is sponsoring a survey now of Jewish cemeteries throughout the country, uncovering centuries of all but forgotten history that connects Belarus to Jews in the United States, Israel, and elsewhere. The establishment of the Commission served as a recognition by the United States that the fabric of our society is strengthened by the visible reminders of our historic roots. It is in the national interest of the United States to encourage the preservation of these European cultural sites associated with our heritage. But the specific mission of the Commission opens a wider discussion with the government leaders about pre-Holocaust Jewish communities in Europe and about the Jews that remain there today. When we talk to another government about the historic Jewish cemetery or a desecrated mass grave, we are not only talking about the deaths of Jews, but about Jewish lives and the moral responsibility to treat their remains with dignity. I want to mention also at this point that in addition to being on the Commission, I also serve as Deputy Director of the National Coalition Supporting Eurasian Jewry, which is a national Jewish organization and advocacy group that works on behalf of Jews in this region of Eurasia and the former Soviet Union, and it promotes strong relations with the U.S. and Israel, and with Israel and the countries in that region. Now the governments, how do they respond? They're usually very responsive to our efforts, especially if they see us as partners. They are generally open to U.S. government-led site preservation efforts, but in some cases conflicts arise when private developers, because there are laws that allow buildings in some places on cemeteries after a certain number of years have elapsed since the last burial. We also encounter resistance to including references to local collaborators on Holocaust memorial plaques, but we insist on historical accuracy. The government of Israel is also involved in these issues. U.S. and government officials often appear together at dedication ceremonies, as in the case in Kalužin, And it's been my experience that the Israeli diplomatic representatives are welcomed as honored speakers, together with representatives of the U.S. government and the local community members. The threads of Jewish heritage extend to both the U.S. and Israel's cooperation has been very helpful in achieving our goals. Finally, the United States as a nation of immigrants has an abiding interest in the restoration and preservation of these sites, important not only to our cultural heritage, but to the cultural heritage of the countries in which they are located. I remind our partners overseas of this and remain hopeful that we will continue to work together to gain our right to know and honor our past.